I have lived in St. Louis for nearly my entire life. But while I've done so, I should clarify that I live in St. Louis County and not the city proper. And while both groups, those of us from the county as well as the city, might consider ourselves to be true St. Louisans, I will contend that there are some differences between the two groups. Differences that are latently manifested in our day-to-day realities and lived experiences. Ones that don't necessarily meet the naked eye. Now, before we dive in and try to understand why some of these differences occur and why they're present, I want to take you back to an experience from my undergraduate education where the story first begins. So, I attended Northwestern for college, and Northwestern's campus is about 30 minutes outside of downtown Chicago. And before matriculating, I had the opportunity to do a pre-orientation program. And this pre-orientation program was in downtown Chicago. And I thought it'd be a really great way to see the sights of the city, make some new friends, and just generally enjoy myself before actually getting to campus. And I was right. I had an unforgettable, fantastic experience. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I would be exposed, for the first time in my life, truly to socioeconomic inequity. That was something that I always knew about being here in St. Louis, being close to Ferguson, and learning about in textbooks and in my classrooms. But it's not something that I had actually seen with my own two eyes. And when I was going around the city of Chicago via the public transportation system, I saw something really interesting that opened my eyes to this socioeconomic inequity. And as you'll see here, here's a map of Chicago. You see you have the north, west, and south sides. What you also see is that this map is doubly encoded. The lighter regions represent areas that are more economically affluent, and the darker regions represent areas that are more economically impoverished. And again, looking at Chicago's north, west, and south sides, you see an interesting story here. You see that the north sides of Chicago are more economically affluent, and the west and south sides of Chicago are not. And as I mentioned, this is a map of Chicago's public transit system. And you can see here that the public transit stops, the CTA stops, are the green and red dots here on this map. And if you look at that encoding with the shading of the map, and you look at that reflected with where these CTA stops are actually located, what you see is an interesting picture. You see that there are more stops located in Chicago's north side, in the more affluent area. And on the west and south sides of Chicago, which is more economically impoverished, you see fewer stops, fewer red dots there. And you might try to explain this by saying, okay, maybe Chicago's north side has more people. That could explain this disparity, right? But actually, Chicago's west and south sides have more population-dense areas. And when you take this into account with the economic inequity, you see that the more economic affluence in the north side, you might have people there who are able to afford private means of transportation. They might have vehicles or the ability to engage in rideshare. So why is it that we see this disparity? Why do we see this shocking disparity? And when I saw this in Chicago, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to see if this was a singular phenomena of the city, or whether this could be in other cities elsewhere across the nation, maybe even right here in my hometown of St. Louis. So before I take you back to St. Louis, I want to have us share a singular frame of reference. I want to take you through an example. So bear with me. It's Monday morning, you're late for class, okay? And if you're a student like myself, when you enter your classroom, what are you going to do? Well, you might hurriedly get to your seat, you might pull out your notebook and laptop, and you might get ready to take notes. Well, if you're a professor, you're not going to do that. You're going to go to the front of the class, calmly pull up your lecture slides, and get ready for today's presentation. And you might say, okay, sure, nothing revolutionary there. But what if we take a step back and try to think about this a little more critically? Why is it that we, as students, do student things? And why is it that professors and teachers do, quote unquote, professor things? I contend that the reason for this is because this is what we've been socially taught to do. These are social norms that have been ingrained across our lifetime, that we've been taught implicitly or explicitly as being our responsibility. And it is this idea which is known as habitus. Habitus is this idea that socially ingrained habits, ideas, beliefs, and dispositions essentially inform the way in which we operate in shared physical environments. And as we think back to my experience in Chicago, how can we think about how these different forms of habitus might influence us? And as we move into the city of St. Louis, how might they influence our dispositions around the city? Another way to think about habitus is through Bandura's social cognitive theory. As you see here, Bandura's social cognitive theory has 3 different factors. It has behavioral, environmental, and cognitive factors. So you might think about habitus and Bandura's social cognitive theory as being together similar. You can think about how our self-efficacy might influence the way in which we might navigate an environment like a classroom, or even the city of St. Louis. You might understand how social norms might influence the way in which we act. And you might also understand how our knowledge and our expectations and our demeanors might again influence the way in which we are. And together with Bandura's social cognitive theory and with habitus, we can begin to understand what it means to be here in St. Louis. We can ask ourselves questions of being here in the Washington University community, what it means to expand outside of that and get into St. Louis. While we have diverse identities represented here at Washington University, we are altogether still bound by being members of the community. What does it mean for us to be a part of this community and to step outside into adjacent areas where those areas are not privileged by the Washington University name, that are external, but we still have an impact on the economic, socioeconomic influence of those areas as well? That is what I want to bring to your attention with Bandura's social cognitive theory here. Now, as we think about Bandura's social cognitive theory, as well as habitus, how might we expand that to St. Louis and bring it back? So we've talked about how Bandura's social cognitive theory does this and creates sort of a Washington University or St. Louis bubble. And now as we expand that, we can also think about how it might contribute to redlining. And redlining is the process in which discriminatory practices influence the way in which we are privileged to different opportunities. And one prominent form of redlining here in St. Louis is the Delmar divide. So now as we look at the Delmar divide, we can see here that it is broken up into 2 sectors. You have the north side of Delmar, where you have higher home value, higher annual income, and lower education. Lower home value, lower annual income, and lower educational attainment. And it's also predominantly Black. And you have the area south of Delmar, which conversely is predominantly white, has higher educational attainment, home value, and annual income. As we move around Washington University and outside into these areas, we can think about how this might influence our dispositions and our demeanors. Also with Delmar, another way to visualize this is through the Strava heat map. The Strava heat map shows that you can see here economic activity or extracurricular activity throughout Delmar. And as you see here, south of Delmar, you have more extracurricular activity with the Strava heat map. And you see here that this extracurricular activity is correlated to higher activity, yes. And you see how this interacts again with Delmar. And what's interesting about this heat map is you see the similar divide that you saw earlier. You saw that there was more economic affluence south of Delmar and less above Delmar. And you see this again correlated in the extracurricular activity of Delmar. And what this kind of represents is that you have potentially more opportunity for extracurricular activity south of Delmar. And how might this essentially affect us as we look towards Delmar and as we consider our roles here at Washington University and beyond? I want us to think about how we can be more open-minded to these differences that exist and how we can be more understanding of the area around. And we have a responsibility being a part of the Washington University community with this name to be more cognizant of the way in which we perceive the surrounding areas as well. And what I want to leave you with is that the most important thing is not to just be more aware of our surroundings, but aware of our perceptions of our surroundings as well. Thank you.